people's impressions of the history of the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879, of course, are framed by the movie Zulu, which is one of the, I think, deservedly great classic films of British cinema. Gave a very young Michael Caine his first acting role. Featured the Battle of Rorke's Drift, which is a true incident in the war. Rather less than 150 British redcoats defending this remote mission station against about 3,000 Zulus in the aftermath of an earlier defeat that same day. And the film is very good at capturing this sense of this small British garrison stuck in the middle of nowhere. There's an almost existential beginning to it, where it begins with a clip of the earlier battle, the Battle of the Cetshwayo, where of course the British were defeated. And you're just shown this scene of dead redcoats strewn about the battlefield. And then there's this sense of menace throughout, that this is about to descend on the characters in the film. And part of the success of the film, I think, is that it doesn't really give you any historical or political context. It's very much history from the ground up. It's looking at this small group of ordinary soldiers who find themselves in this remote colonial posting, suddenly thrust into the front line when they weren't expecting to be. And it's got a kind of universal feel, I think, as a result of that. And I think, and feature films always, of course, reflect the attitudes of the times in which they're made, as well as those that they're attempting to cover in the film. And to me, it's always struck me as being a very 1960s film. It's a film in lots of ways that's preoccupied with class. The main dramatic conflict in the film, forget about the Zulus on the other side of the barricade, it's the two officers, Michael Caine and Stanley Baker, Lieutenants Chard and Brumhead, one of whom, Brumhead, is depicted as a sort of very much officer class, descended from a long line of officers. The more practical engineer, Chard, you're sort of left feeling, well, he's come up from below somewhere. They're not equal in social status, although they've got equal rank in the army. And throughout, there's this great kind of contest between the two. I've always thought of it very much as a post-colonial film. In 1963, of course, we've pretty much withdrawn from our empire. We're now looking back at it with a little bit of distance, reassessing. A lot of our colonial icons, and arguably the Battle of Rorke's Drift, like the Battle of Balaclava, the Charge of the Light Brigade, were kind of icons of the Victorian era. And the film, I think, is very much standing back and saying, well, hang on, was it quite as we saw it in those old Victorian picture books, the gallant heroes manning the far-flung barricades of empire? And in fact, throughout the film, it's undercut with people saying, actually, what are we doing here? What are we doing in Africa? Why are we here? What's the point of this? And the film certainly, rather than, to me, adopting a glorious approach to the battle, actually is quite a downbeat sort of film in lots of ways. It does stress the futility and destructiveness of war. It says, why are the Zulus our enemies? What glory is there in killing these people who are actually defending their country against us when we shouldn't be here? So I think it's a hugely interesting film with all sorts of sort of 60s attitudes, and in many ways frames the way I think now that we look back at our colonial adventuring. Our attitudes today have changed, moved on even since the 1960s, but you can kind of look at Zulu and still find a lot there to understand what the film is saying and to sympathise with today.